If you don't have a system for finishing songs, then you're sabotaging your music. Seriously, you're shooting yourself in the foot right out the gate. And the reason you need a system is because you can use it over and over to get the same results every single time instead of just guessing and trying to figure out if a song is done. So buckle up, because I'm going to show you my exact system that I use to get over 100 million streams on Spotify and make a living from music for over a decade. And it's not like I just had one song that blew up. I've had like 30 or 40 songs get over 1 million streams. And I just say that to let you know that this method really works, and it's going to help you out a ton if you follow every single step. Because if you don't, every single step that you skip, you're going to lower the quality of your final product. So don't try to take any shortcuts. Beverly Sills said there's no shortcuts to any place worth going. Also, these steps can be applied to any DAW, whether you're in Ableton, Logic, FL Studio, whatever your weapon of choice is. Okay, so let's get right into it. I'm going to assume A, you've written a song, B, the vocals have been tracked and comped, and the song is fully produced. And at this point, you're just trying to mix the song, master the song, and get it prepped for Spotify and all the other streaming services. Now, if you don't have a fully written song, I have a video exactly for that. It teaches you how to write a song from beginning to end. And that's going to help you out a ton if you've never written a song. But if you do have a written song and it's not fully produced, I have all kinds of videos on production as well. Okay, so you've got a fully written and fully produced song. Now what? Well, there's really only 3 steps to finishing a song: mixing, mastering, and distribution. Now, there's smaller steps within each one of those, but those are the 3 main pillars. And just as a disclaimer, I do these 3 steps a little different than you probably do, but I get incredible results. So I encourage you just to try this out and follow along, because I think it's going to drastically improve the quality of your music. So let's start with mixing. Mixing is just basically making sure all the elements in your song sound good together. Making sure the drums aren't too loud, making sure you can hear the singer's voice clearly, things like that. Now, I personally like mixing a song directly in the project that I produced it in, instead of exporting out all the tracks and mixing it in a separate project. Because that way, if I need to change anything as far as production goes, I don't have to go through that whole process of exporting everything again. It's way more convenient. I could just do it right then and there in the project. And usually the reason people export stems and it goes into another project anyways is because they're sending it out to a separate mixing engineer. But we're doing it all ourselves, so that's just not necessary. Now, the other thing I do that's kind of different is I don't really master songs. At least I don't export a mix, drag it into a separate project, and master it there. I used to do that, but it ended up being an extra step that I just really didn't need. Now, prepare yourselves for some facts that might sting a little bit. Mastering really started becoming a thing in the late 1950s when vinyl records went on the market, and mastering engineers would make records louder because that would lead to more radio play and higher sales. Mastering's also used to make sure all the songs on an album are the same volume or the same loudness. Mixing your song and making it loud enough can all be done in the same project, so just save yourself some steps and just do it in the same project. And that way you can hear what the final product is going to sound like as you're mixing. The truth is, mastering is mostly just making sure your song's loud enough. Now, before you freak out, I understand that some genres of music really benefit from being mastered with this crazy outboard gear setup, and that can help for mixing too. But for the vast majority of you guys out there, this method is not only going to be the easiest, but it's going to get you the cleanest and loudest mix and master for your songs, and you can do it all yourself. And also, just let me say, if you're relying on mastering to save your song, then you're focusing on the wrong thing entirely. In my opinion and experience, everything can and should be done in the mixing stage. My friend who produces and mixes for people like Lady Gaga and Skrillex showed me this technique years ago, and it's completely changed the quality of my music for the best since I started using it. And in fact, I can literally hear the difference in my music from before and after I started doing this. And I actually started getting way more people requesting me to mix their stuff after I switched, because my masters were so much louder and my mixes were so much cleaner. Okay, I had to clarify all of that because I get tons of comments asking about this stuff, and I just wanted to make it crystal clear for you guys. And honestly, if it bothers you to have it in the same project, just export all the stems and drag them into a new project, and then follow the same steps. Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're actually gonna start with mastering, then go to mixing. I know, it's kind of crazy, but just stick with me. So all I do to master a song is I just put one single plugin on the master channel. That plugin is Pro L2, which is made by FabFilter. And if you don't have that plugin and you can't afford it, I'll show you how to get something really similar with stock Ableton plugins. And for those of you that do have it, these are the settings that I use, so feel free to pause and copy the settings and just have this Pro L2 on your master channel. This is how I actually start every single project that I work on, and when it comes time to export the song in the final master, I just basically have to make sure the song's loud enough. For those of you that don't have this plugin, let's jump into Ableton and I'll show you a little workaround with stock Ableton plugins. Okay, now that we've got Ableton open, here is a pretty loud song, and I've double clicked on this master channel here, and you can see there's no plugins on it. Here's what it sounds like.
I'm surprised to stay for sure. I love you more than I did before, and all I thought I wanted in your eyes.
And you can hear that it's distorting. If we press tab to switch into this view, we can see to the bottom right here,
Surprise this day for sure.
we are getting way into the red. So I'm gonna just press tab again. The first mastering method for Ableton is we can literally just drag a limiter on. I would set the ceiling to 0, the look ahead to 1.5, and the release to 1. And these are some pretty good settings to get you started, and it'll allow you to get your song pretty loud without it distorting ideally.
Surprise this day for sure. I love you more than I did before.
Now the only issue with this method is it's not very transparent. You can really hear the limiter working, and it makes the drums less punchy, and it just kind of makes the whole mix a little bit too squashed. So what I would do is if I only had Ableton plugins, I would start with a compressor. I would turn this ratio all the way up. I would turn this release to auto. I would make sure to turn on makeup and peak. And then after that, we need to limit or clip it. So I go to drive and color here, and I drag a saturator onto it. And to the right where it says soft clip, I would turn that on. Let's listen to it really quick.
Surprise this day for sure. I love you more than I did before.
Okay, so I'm not sure if you can totally hear it, but this is letting way more of those drums cut through, and this will allow for a cleaner mix and master at the end of the day. The only thing you have to be wary of is listening for distortion, and a lot of times for a mastering setup like this, if you have a bit too much sub bass or low end coming through, that's going to be the thing that's causing the distortion. So in this song, this kick and this sub bass here, if I mute those, there's no distortion at all.
Surprise this day for sure. I love you more than I did before.
So if I am getting distortion, I can literally just turn that bass down until the distortion stops.
Surprise this day for sure. I love you more than I did before.
And then if I'm still getting distortion, I can just turn down every single track. And I can do that by going up to the top track here, clicking on it, scrolling down to the bottom, holding shift and clicking on the last track, and then click on any of these faders here to the right and use the arrow keys to turn everything down until it stops distorting. So the thing is, with this method, it's going to be a lot cheaper. You don't have to buy a plugin. You can do it all with Ableton stock plugins. But if you are willing to invest, you can use Pro L or Pro L2 and get your song about 10 to 15% louder, and the mix will be just a little bit cleaner too. So it's up to you. The question is that price point worth 10 or 15% difference? But either way, put this setup on your master chain if you just want to stick to Ableton plugins, or if you want to go all out, go ahead and throw Pro L on there and keep following along. All right, now that we have the master channel taken care of, let's jump into mixing. For mixing, I have a 4-step process that's super easy to follow along with. The first step of that process is called balance. All you're gonna do is focus entirely on the volume level of each element, and we're gonna get our song sounding as good as we possibly can just by turning stuff up and down. And then we can use some other techniques down the line and refine stuff even more, but we need to balance everything first to get the best foundation. Otherwise, we're gonna have some big problems down the road that should have been solved in this balancing step. All right, let's use this same song from earlier as an example. Okay, so let's just play this chorus really quick and see if we can tell what's out of balance.
Surprise this day for sure. I love you more than I did before.
Okay, it kind of seems like the vocals are a little bit too quiet, right? So let's bump those up a little bit. I usually work in 1 to 2 decibel increments because anything smaller than that and I can't really hear much of a difference. So for these vocals, I'm just gonna click on the fader here to the right and use the arrow keys to turn them up and down and try and get a good level that way.
Surprise this day for sure. I love you more than I did before. All I thought I wanted in your eyes.
Okay, now the vocals seem a bit better, but now it seems like the kick is too quiet. So now I'm gonna do that same thing and turn the kick up here to the right.
Surprise this day for sure. I love you more than I did before. All I thought I wanted.
Now it seems like those background vocals are a little bit too loud. These ones right here. So I'm gonna bump those down 2 dB using the arrow keys. Now let's have a listen.
Surprise this day for sure. I love you more than I did before.
Okay, hopefully now you're starting to grasp. This is all balancing is. We're gonna focus on each element individually and tweak little parameters, but balance is all about getting everything to sound good together. And here's a quick little pro tip. If you're mixing your own vocals, a lot of times when people do that, they have the tendency to mix their own voice too quiet, so be aware of that. And also a lot of times people mix drums too quietly. Just some food for thought. So if you're following along, pause the video and go ahead and balance out each element by turning the volume up or down. Okay, after your song is all balanced out, the next step is gonna be compression. That could be a scary word for some of you. And if you don't know what compression is, it's basically just squashing a sound. It makes the quiet parts louder and it squashes the louder parts. And essentially it just reduces a signal's dynamic range. Think less like this and more like this. So here's a normal vocal with no compression, and then here is a vocal exported out with some compression on it. Notice how the quiet parts are louder and the whole thing is basically just thicker. Now, compression does wonders for things like vocals, and it can bring someone's voice right to the front of the mix so you can hear them crystal clear throughout the whole song. I'm not going to get into how to compress each element here because it would have to be its own video, and I actually have a paid course with all that in it, but I can show you how to get started with compression. So let's jump into Ableton. I'll give you guys a little crash course. Okay, compression 101. Let's get right into the basics, and I'm going to drag a compressor onto this clap. This is what it sounds like with no compressor, just so you have a reference point. So on your compressor, it's helpful to click on this jagged line right down here. That way we can see what we're doing. First things first, this ratio is basically just how much we want the compressor to affect the sound. So the higher we go, the heavier the compression, and the lower we go, it eases up. The next thing is attack, and this is just how quickly you want the compressor to start working on the sound. And the release is how long you want the compressor to hold on for. To keep things simple, I usually just stick to RMS over here to the right. And then the last thing we can play with is threshold here. And this is just telling the compressor what volume level you want it to start taking effect at. So for this clap here, let's turn the ratio up all the way so we can really hear what it's doing. And if we pull this threshold down, we can hear that it starts squashing the sound. Now, let's say we want to let a little bit of that clap through before the compressor starts working. We can turn up our attack and say that we want the compressor to start after 4.5 milliseconds. That's going to let a little bit of the clap through and then it's going to start squashing it. Or maybe we want it to start right away and also stop right after that. And that would cut out some of the transient in the beginning of the clap and make the tail a bit longer. So you can play with all these different settings, ratio, attack, release, and threshold, and get all kinds of different effects. So if you have a basic understanding of how it works, at that point you can click this little triangle, and there's all kinds of presets here. So if I was going to compress a vocal, and I didn't have any of these plugins on here, I would start with something just like a generic compressor. And then I could play with the ratio and the threshold, and use those to bring the vocal to the front of the mix, and make it so you can hear every word super clearly through the whole song. So use presets when you're starting out, and just tweak them until you get the sound the way that you want it. The more hands-on you are, the more you're going to learn. So experiment a bit and use trial and error. Real quick, let me just show you one of my favorite third-party compressors, and it's made by Waves, and it's called CLA2A. And it basically just has two knobs, gain and peak reduction. And this plugin is just magic. Here's my vocal with all the other processing on it, but this plugin turned off.
I'm surprised to say for sure I love you more.
Now listen to when I turn it on. It brings it right up to the front of the mix.
I'm surprised to say for sure I love you more than I did before.
It's not just turning it up, but it's limiting that dynamic range. And it just makes the vocal sound so much more present. I'm not trying to convince you to buy another plugin, but I'm just saying compression is powerful, so don't overlook it. It makes a big difference. Real quick, if you're learning anything or just enjoying the video, I would love for you to consider subscribing and giving me the chance to teach you how to make the best music you're capable of. Okay, back to the video. So after you've gone through your song and at the very least compressed your vocals, maybe your bass and your guitars or some other mid-range elements, then we're going to move on to EQ, balance, compression, EQ. So EQ stands for equalization, and this is where we can get really surgical with our mixing and subtract or boost certain frequencies from each element. Now, I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty of how I would EQ each element because once again, it would have to be its own video, and that video is also in my paid course, but I will get you started with some super helpful tips for EQing. All right, let's just go over some quick EQ basics. So I have this vocal right here.
I'm surprised to say for sure I love you more than I did before.
Keep in mind it's a scratch vocal, so it's not perfect. But for demonstration purposes, we can drag an EQ onto it here. And if we just look on the graph here, as we play it, we'll see all the different frequencies coming through.
I'm surprised to say for sure.
Now, if you look here to the left, from 0 to 100, this is all sub-bass frequency. So it's like super low bass, the stuff that would come through a subwoofer and make a room shake, but we don't want any of that stuff on a vocal. So what we're gonna do is just use a high pass filter and scoop out everything below, I'd say about 80 hertz. You can even go up to 100 hertz if you want, but just play in that range of 80 to 100. And I would go through each and every element of your song and see if it makes sense to leave those low frequencies in. Most elements don't need all this low end information, and it ends up taking up extra room in your mix. Now, a couple elements that do need this are the kick. I'll drag an EQ so you can see. You could see all this low end information that we need. And then also this sub bass here. So those two things we can leave it in. But our vocal and most of our other elements, we can just take it out entirely. Now, another thing we can do is get rid of some of that boxy sound and some of that muddy sound. And one way I like to get rid of some of this muddiness or boxiness in vocals is just to select the low shelf option and just bring it down a little bit.
I'm surprised to say for sure I love you more than I did before.
Last but not least, we could just boost a little highs using a high shelf like this. I usually go around 5 to maybe 7K and then just push it up a little bit and it'll brighten everything up and make it sound so much more polished.
I'm surprised to say for sure I love you more than I did before.
Now obviously you can overdo this pretty easily, but if you go through your whole mix, you get rid of the unnecessary low end, you try to clean up a little bit of that mud, and you boost the high end on the elements that need it, it's going to be like giving your song a facelift. The mix is going to be so much more clean, and it's actually going to end up being even louder with less distortion because you're getting rid of all that unnecessary low end that takes up a bunch of space and causes the limiter to work harder and squash your mix too much. So a little bit of EQ goes a long way. There's also tons of different graphs online that show you different frequencies to boost or pull back to get the desired effect. Like if you want more bite on a guitar or you want a snare drum to have more oomph, there's so much that EQ can do. And this is just some basics to get you started. All right, after you've gone through and removed all the unnecessary low end, you've reduced some of that mud maybe, and you've brought up some of those highs to make things sound shiny and expensive, then we're gonna hit our last and final phase of mixing, which is effects. Ethan, effects are used in production, right? They're also something mixing engineers utilize sometimes to really take things that last 10%. I personally use the sends and returns in Ableton to add effects to things like vocals and even drums and percussion. All right, so we have this vocal we've been working with, and this is it with no effects at all.
I'm surprised to say for sure I love you more than I did before.
So the first thing we can do is add a little bit of really tight ping pong or slap delay. So check this out. In Ableton, under the faders to the right, you have these sends. So they send the vocal all the way down here to where it says A reverb and B delay. And you can put whatever you want on these, but basically you can send as many different tracks to these as you want if you just want to add a little reverb to something or a little delay to something. So let me show you what it sounds like if I just send some of this vocal to that really tight delay.
I'm surprised to say for sure I love you more than I did before, and all I thought I wanted in your eyes.
It almost sounds like it's in a room or something. It's kind of a cool little effect. I'll probably back it off a little bit.
I'm surprised to say for sure I love you more.
And then we can also use these sends to add things like reverb.
You more than I did before, and all I thought I wanted in your eyes.
And then another thing we can do to get even more precise is we can go down here to those return tracks. I'm going to double click on this reverb one to open it up. And we can even throw an EQ on after this effect. And then we can actually EQ the reverb by itself.
I'm surprised to say for sure I love.
If I solo the reverb, this is what it sounds like. You can hear those background vocals are also being sent to the reverb. So this is just a cool way to filter it. This is a really great way to add some life to your mix. Sometimes we focus so much on having a quiet recording environment. We don't want any sound reverberating off the walls, which most of the time is really good, but sometimes it can cause your music to sound kind of dead. And this is a really great way to bring stuff back to life in the mixing process. A really good mixing engineer is able to bring a song to life. And oftentimes these effects are that last little 10% that takes a song over the top. So if you haven't yet and you want to, just go ahead and pause the video and try experimenting with some of these sends and returns and just play with some of these effects to bring your mix to life. All right, so now that we've balanced our elements, we've compressed some of them, we've EQ'd them, and we've added effects to our song, it's time to enter into what I like to call quality control mode. I know this is a lot, but this is what's going to separate you from all your friends who think that they can make music too. And this system took me years to figure out. So just keep sticking with me and follow along because your song's going to sound so much better after this. So I have 4 real quick steps that I personally use for quality control. And these are just to make sure our song is as good as it could possibly be before we release it out into the world. So do these after you think you're done mixing because this is going to help you catch everything that you missed. So step number 1 of quality control is what I like to call combing. You're going to comb through your song or basically just listen through your song over and over again and just change things as you hear them come up. For instance, maybe this guitar sounds a little too loud, or there's a breath on this vocal that sticks out. And once you can listen through your entire song front to back without hearing anything that you would change, that's when you're done combing and you can move on to step number 2, which is take a break. Your ears can only handle so much, and your fresh ears will catch tons of mistakes that your tired ears miss. I try to give myself at least 1 night of sleep before finalizing a mix. I'll have a day where I think a song is done, and then I'll go to sleep, I'll wake up, I'll listen to it the next day, and I'll catch a couple things here and there that I would have missed before. So once you've combed through your song, you've taken a break, you want to hit the 3rd part of quality control, which is listen on multiple sets of speakers. Now, obviously the best case scenario is you have nice studio monitors, because the idea is if it sounds good on those, then it'll sound good on everything else you play it through. But if you don't have the best monitors in the world, which is probably like 97% of you guys, then it's really helpful to listen to your song on at least 3 different sets of speakers. Let's say an iPhone, a car stereo system, and AirPods or some kind of headphones. This is going to help you put yourself in the shoes of the listener and also help you catch broad brushstroke stuff, like maybe the vocals just being too quiet in the whole song overall, or maybe the synth sounds are taking over the mix, that kind of stuff. Plus, it's also really inspiring when the mix sounds good on a bunch of different systems because you know that it's going to sound great for your listeners. Okay, so after that, the fourth and final step for quality control, and hands down the most important, and that is to A/B your song with another professionally mixed and mastered song. This means holding up what you've done and comparing it to the best of the best. Now, I would recommend finding something in the Spotify Top 50 because pretty much everyone working on those songs is the best of the best. Okay, so to drag a reference into Ableton, I'm just going to press Command T and make a new track. I like to keep the reference right at the very top. We're going to go ahead to where it says master, and we're going to hit external out. That way this isn't going through any of our master chain, and it's on its own totally separate channel. Then you got to find your reference track, and of course just drag it right into Ableton. Then it's going to take a second to load. Make sure you click warp down here to the left so it's off and Ableton's not warping the song at all. And then where it says start here to the left, you want to click on this 0 and just drag down. That'll make sure the song starts at the very beginning. Then up here to the right, we just want to turn that track off so that it's not playing at the same time that we're listening to our song. Then I can drag it and position it however I want. We can even find the chorus in the reference, highlight it, press Command E to slice it, and then just drag it and line it up with the chorus of our song. And then we just go back and forth by pressing solo on the reference track, listening through.
Just for you, just to stay connected.
And then clicking solo again to hear our song.
I'm surprised to stay for sure. I love you more than I did before.
And we're just going to go back and forth over and over and adjust our song as necessary. Make sure to pick a professional reference because you want to be comparing your song to the best of the best. I use my song as a reference, but that's just to avoid copyright. Normally I go right for the Spotify Top 50 and I try to find the closest thing to what I'm working on. And during this step as well, this is a really good time to check the volume level of your master. You can utilize that method I showed you earlier of highlighting all the tracks and turning everything up or down to make sure that your song is as loud as the reference track. This is your final chance to analyze, compare, and do your best to get your song to measure up to the industry standard. And if that sounds like a lot to you or you're struggling, let me just tell you that all this stuff is like a muscle. The more you go through these steps, the better you're going to get. And eventually you can have industry standard music without needing to pay a bunch of other people to make your music sound great. Whew. All right, now that we have our song mixed and it's mastered, it's time to export it and upload it. So in Ableton, you just highlight the length of the song, you hit Command-Shift-R to export. These are my export settings if you want to copy them. Also, quick pro tip, if you're exporting a final master for something, close all your other applications and don't do anything else on your computer while it's exporting, because you never know, it could cause a CPU spike and cause little glitches and pops in your song. You want all of your computer's resources to be going towards exporting that song. Okay, so now that we have our master, all we need is some art and we can upload our song to a distributor. All a distributor does is essentially put your song out there to all the different streaming services like Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube Music, all that kind of stuff. I personally use DistroKid, and I would highly recommend it because you just pay a small annual fee and you can upload as many songs as you want. With them, you also get verified on Spotify automatically, which looks cool. And to be honest, I'm not sure of how big of a difference it really makes, but it's a nice perk. So once you have your master and your art and you've signed up for your plan on DistroKid or whatever service you want to go through, here are the settings that I usually go with. All right, here are the inner workings of DistroKid. So first thing is just click upload. We're going to upload music. Now under services, I like to select all of them. You have to click the special box to use Snapchat. If you upload your music onto your own YouTube channel, like your own artist channel, then you don't need to do YouTube Music. So if you have plans to upload like a music video or a visualizer or even just the official audio, you can untick this, because otherwise if you don't, DistroKid is going to upload it on a topic channel and it's going to be a whole separate thing than your channel. Just something to be aware of. Select one if it's just a single. Obviously select more if you're going to upload a whole album. Previously released? No. Artist or band name? I've been releasing a lot of stuff with I Love Us to Worship, but normally you just put your artist name here. You pick your release date. For record label, if you're independent, you can just put your name here. Then just select your album art and upload it. It'll tell you if it's too big or too small. For language, genre, and secondary genre, it should all be pretty self-explanatory. Same with the title, if there's a feature on the song, if it's a special version like a radio edit. And then here under audio file, you're going to click choose file and make sure that it's the master version. You don't want to upload the wrong version. For Dolby, just hit no. The songwriter step's pretty self-explanatory. Just make sure you add all the writers right here. All this other stuff, just read through. Now here under preview preview clip start time. If there's like a really good part of your song that you want to use for Reels or for TikTok or whatever, this is how you tell those services where to start your song. So let's say at 45 seconds, the really catchy chorus starts. And when people make a reel with my song in the background, that's where I want the song to start. This is how you get to choose that. You can also choose your track price here. For artist mapping here, this is just making sure that your song is going to go to the right profile on Spotify, Apple Music, all that kind of stuff. And then down here on the extras, they have a bunch of different upsell stuff. I usually select Discovery Pack because I'm pretty sure this makes it so people can Shazam your song or use Siri or whatever. And then for YouTube Content ID, this basically makes it so if anyone else uploads your song on YouTube, the copyright system is going to find that song and any money generated by it is going to go to you instead of the person who posted it. So I think it's a good thing. You just need to make sure to check every single one of these boxes. Make sure that you can answer all these honestly. I usually don't click Store Maximizer, but use your personal judgment for that. For loudness normalization, we already went through so much to make sure our mix and master was pristine. So obviously we're going to skip this. We're going to skip this other mastering one. Leave a legacy is kind of cool. It just means if you leave DistroKid or stop paying for it, then your song will stay uploaded forever. All right, and down here you have to select all of these to upload. And then right before you click done, I would just double check that you selected the right release date, double check your song title, and double check that you uploaded the correct file, meaning the final master of the song. Then you can just hit done. You're going to watch everything upload here, and as soon as it's done, you're good to go. Okay, wow. Take a sigh of relief, because if you followed along, you just took a huge step in your music career, and I'm proud of you for putting yourself out there. Honestly, it takes courage to put your art on display, so give yourself a pat on the back. Now, if you're watching this video and you've never made a song, or maybe you have, but you just wanted to go deeper and have a way more comprehensive look into each and every step of the music making process, I have a course that I mentioned earlier, and I've spent years developing this thing. And in it, I show people how to make professional quality music every single step of the way. So if you liked this video at all, that's just the tip of the iceberg. If that sounds interesting to you, I'll put part of the course in the description of this video for free, so you can check it out and see if it's something that you're interested in. There's also a 30-day money-back guarantee, and that way you can try it out and get really into it without any risk. Okay, enough of me pitching my course, but seriously, it's so helpful, and I put so much into it. Okay, thanks so much for watching. I really do value your time and attention, and I hope you learned some things that you can actually apply. Feel free to comment any questions or any feedback. I read all the comments. I respond when I can, but as the channel grows, I've been getting way more comments, so I can't respond to all of them. But more than anything, remember to stop making excuses and start making music. Cheers. Oh, baby. Woo.